Hey everybody, DonTheCrown here, and if you're wondering if you should be able to play Rosa 2 in the Overrealm season, whether or not she's still going to be very good, I'm going to say that she's going to be completely fine, very, very strong character, because when I was looking at the patch notes, I was relatively impressed to see not a lot of nerfs in those patch notes. I do think that she might not necessarily be the best choice for Supreme Showdown this season, which we'll talk about here in a second. But let's just kind of go over the patch notes for Rosa. So they did nerf down a couple of different numbers here. So first thing that they nerfed down was how much mercury per second you consume. This is really not anything that you need to care about. Basically, this makes Rosa easier to play at lower level, so you have a longer period of time that you're actually in your realm, and you need to like consume less mana at endgame in order to keep your Mercury realm up. The next thing that they changed here was they took it so that for every 10% of unsealed max mana, you got 2% attack speed and 4% LA damage. Now you get 2% attack speed and 3% elemental damage. So this is like going from, 40% multiplier to a 30% multiplier, which really is not all that big of a deal. I know some people were kind of freaking out about this. Basically, the way the damage formula is just base damage, and then you times that by all increased damage, and then you times that by all additive damage, multiplied by each other. And since we only really care about what's changing inside one of these additives, we can just basically set the base damage to whatever you want, like 100. And then we can just go look at the difference here. So like 1.4, and then in our new case here is going to be 1.3. And so the outcome here would be like 140 damage with the old setup, and then 130 damage setup here. And that is not really all that much of a difference there. As you can see, 130 divided by 140 turns out to be 92.85. So we're looking at basically a 7.14% nerf for the build, which is not really all that impactful. It's not that bad because these all are separated into their own blocks. The losing some out of one of the additional blocks that we have is not that big of a deal. Now we also go down here and we lose about 10% of our additional max mana. This also kind of sucks. It's a little bit less than 10% max mana, but just gonna need to invest a little bit heavier into getting your mana up, but you're not going to need as much mana to consume in order to keep your realm up at least, but you're definitely going to still need to get your mana up some way, somehow, just from investing more in your gear. This is definitely overcomeable. Also, Realm of Mercury here hits a little bit less hard. This is something that definitely was giving you more damage. So we lose about 7% damage here from our realm, which definitely does impact the overall damage profile. Haven't really done the math on this one, but it's not really all that big of a deal. Rosa was super duper strong. And then for the non-mana stacking version, you lose another 10% damage here on weapon damage. Since this is weapon damage, mana stacking would never ever use this, and so it doesn't really matter all that much for us in endgame if you're going to do mana stacking. And that's pretty much it for the nerfs. The only other thing that kind of got nerfed from our entire kit is that Phantom is basically not going to have as good of a roll range as it did before. And that's the only legendary that got any sort of effect. You could also say that losing Apocalypse here, I didn't even have this until 2 days ago because I was just throwing money at sequences to kind of learn what was going on. And so this is basically something you don't necessarily need to worry about all that much. Soul Candles were not very impactful for us in terms of damage. We did get more shadows and more damage, a little bit more defenses from Poison Relief. So losing Poison Relief does hurt, but it's not really all that big of a deal. Now I do have a written guide here for the build over here on Heroic. I will put this up on the description, so if you want to go check this out. It is going to be pretty much up to date for the next season if you want to play Mana Stacker. One of the things to note is that our new sequence of choice is actually going to be supported by level 25 Steamroll, which is kind of a damage increase. We're going from having a sequence that gave us basically 30% more damage. So you're using this sequence before. the -20 for weapons, which doesn't do anything for us, to +30 attack damage. So it's like 30% more damage. But then level 25 Steamroll is quite better than that. So Steamroll is another support. You won't be able to use this support, unfortunately, but this is 43% more damage, which is, you know, more than 30. We do lose a little bit of attack speed, but like getting to the attack speed cap is still very viable and very easy to do. That was not nerfed at all. I think I could have gotten to like 40 attacks a second. You can't really attack more than 30 times a second. Otherwise the game like doesn't register your additional attacks, which does kind of suck. Oh, the one other thing I did not mention, sorry, I forgot one Rosa nerf. So there was one more Rosa thing here, and it is the recovery part of your mana. So it's this part right here. So we also only restore 16% of our max mana instead of 20%. Sorry, I just kind of like forgot about this. So it's 4% less sealed mana, which is definitely impactful, but it's not like the end of the world. Rosa is already incredibly tanky because you're attacking 30 times a second, recuperating 12% of your life every second. So you're recuperating 360% of your maximum life, mana in this case. And now is just going to be 30 times 8. So, oh no, you're only recuperating 240% of your maximum mana every second if you're just spam attacking. And yeah, that's still not bad. Now, the one thing that I think could potentially be bad for Rosa 2 in Supreme Showdown 20 is who we're fighting, and more specifically, the mechanic for this particular Supreme Showdown. Pretty much what the mechanic is for Supreme Showdown is not going to be the bombs, but instead these like little yellow balls that you need to pick up. As you're noticing, I need to go around and pick up a ton of these, and the amount of them you need to pick up goes up and up as the mechanic goes on. The more you pick up, the more damage you do at the end as well. But this requires a lot of movement, and Rosa 2 does not like moving. You can definitely get enough damage to, like, you know, stack up faster by like doing aura stacking version of the build, but you ideally want to move as little as possible. And this is like not optional. If you do not pick up all of the yellow orbs, you pretty much are just going to get instantaneously one shot by the mechanic. I think it does like 1 billion damage or something. So I don't think you can avoid it any way, shape, or form. Granted, you can shrug off a lot of the damage in the arena, but it will be a little bit more difficult in order to keep your DPS up, especially because we can't like really automate our attack while we're moving. Hopefully this video helped you out. I'm still pretty hyped for Rosa 2. I think it's going to be a solid build all around, and it's pretty crazy to see how little they nerfed it. I am going to be playing Bing 2 though, so keep an eye out for a guide for that, and we'll see you guys again soon. Check out Heroic for some more guides as well. Later.